Judaism, in my opinion, any other religion, is a constant in human experience, but a constant which is constantly changing. There's a lot of changes, a lot of interpretations. The tools are changing. The material is changing. The light is changing. In my opinion, that's what is fascinating in religion. To see the constant, but to understand that the constant is constantly changing. And if someone looks for only the constant, like theology, it doesn't see the change. And doesn't see what, in my opinion, people who live Judaism are thinking about. And Kabbalah is the same. You have a process. And this process is going on all the time. You don't have a static topic. That's a lesson that I learned. They are studying the text time and again, but they cannot study it exactly the same because there are new texts coming and new interpretations. Can you imagine someone will say, I know science, I know literature? You will laugh. You say, what's the meaning? What do you know? You know something. With Kabbalah is exactly the same. What do you mean? I know better some forms of Kabbalah and less other forms of Kabbalah. And they are different. And I don't attempt to, offer an answer which unifies. That's what happens today a lot in the popular Kabbalah. People are teaching and making millions by telling people what is Kabbalah. That we know. I am very far away from it, meaning I don't attempt to simplify, because that will be a betrayal of what I know. What I'm saying is I don't know Kabbalah. There is no Kabbalah.
When you look at the field before Professor Idel, it was a field that was dominated by Gershom Shalom, the founder of this field in Jerusalem. And part of the work that Moshe Idel has done was to open up to, in a way, criticize many, many different assumptions and insights of the previous generation, but then at the same time not impose on us and the students a whole new set of theological assumptions or pictures and understandings. What he did really is complicate dramatically the field.
In Jewish studies, the scholarship was dominated by the historical philological. And Sholem had to comply in order to remain in academy. People are studying basically printed books, like the Zohar or Luria, but there's a lot of repetition in scholarship. My experience of reading text is that you should come with less questions to the text and allow the text to speak to you. That's what I call to free the text from the agenda of scholarship.
I think it's just, as a scholar of religion, of Jewish culture, he just identifies that any attempt by other scholars, including Sholem and including also scholars of the present, to articulate a essential kind of understanding of what Kabbalah says about anything is just false.
Moshe, were you raised in a religious home?
I was born in a small place where were not intellectuals there. It was not my cup of tea, all these religious stories and the Hebrew and traditional life and all this was, I was in a way alienated. And what interested me was books. At the age of 13, 14, I studied accordion. And then I was playing at weddings, making relatively a lot of money in one night. And I could buy a lot of books.
Saying that these are just the front shelves, there's more books behind every book.
I was in Romania all the time up to 63. 63 August, I arrived here. When I came to Israel, I didn't know anything about Israel. I knew French. I couldn't read Hebrew, I couldn't read English. People were very welcoming. There were also a lot of other shocks. For example, coming from a dull intellectual background of the communist, I discovered books on yoga. I bought immediately. Whatever money I had, I bought books, 10 books on Hindu philosophy and yoga. So that was a huge discovery. The fact that you are free, intellectually free, it's amazing. I mean, in Romania, I knew there are things you don't say. It's dangerous to say. There was something meaning very, very powerful. Later I understood how powerful it was. To understand that you are free, it's an amazing discovery.
How did you come to study Kabbalah? You seem to suggest that it was an accident.
Look, I was living in Haifa. So someone offered me the job to read manuscripts on Kabbalah as an assistant. So I did it for money. I was supposed to write on philosophy. But since it was paid, so I started to read manuscripts. So I've seen, look, that's a whole ocean. That's fascinating. No one has seen it. In Kabbalah, I was finding unknown text every day. So this stirred my curiosity. That medieval script, that even if someone knows Hebrew, he cannot read. The country actually gave me more than I gave to the country. Meaning, to receive a job at the university is, how to put it, was beyond my imagination.
זה כשזה יהיה מוכן, זה הרבה כסף, אבל יש תמונות בהדפסה אם תרצו. What is Kabbalah? Human being has two elements of creation, the feminine side of creation, the masculine side of creation. Kabbalah teaches that a human being has influence on every aspect of creation, as if there were strings connected to the whole world. This is called the Shiur Koma. It's also called Ilan HaChaim, the tree of life. And it corresponds on the one hand to a human body. Our soul was lowered from the upper worlds into this dark physical world for the sake of searching for the nitzotzot HaKadoshim, the holy sparks which are scattered everywhere throughout creation, and all for illuminating the depths, illuminating the darkness. And the only way to find true tranquility and solace of soul is through connecting ourselves to God's oneness.
There's a way in which one can think of Judaism as the religion of the book and the word, and it's very rational. But Moshe, he seems to have introduced the irrational in magic and complexity. Is that true?
Looking at the hermetic, at the magical components of our tradition, it just gives you a totally different understanding of the tradition.
People think that Judaism is a kind of a theoretical, systematic way of thinking about the world, but I think what Idel pushes us to think and to acknowledge is that it's not so much. So the Jews are people of the book, and they are the people of the body. Jews perform a lot. The body has no importance from its own. Its importance is that it carries the divine in it. I think what Idel wanted us to see, that Jews are they're performing a lot with the body. They're doing a lot of things. They have 613 mitzvot, commandments, and this fact creates the kind of mysticism that we talk about, and the centrality of the body with the centrality of the book merge into the body as a location for us to worship God through the commandments.
So, when you were doing your PhD, what were you discovering that led you to begin to challenge the status quo?
I didn't want to challenge the status quo at all. That's only mythologism. I read the manuscripts and I attempted to take in consideration what's written there. I had discussed with Shalom who is the status quo. I didn't have the feeling that's a problem to challenge. The problem was not in what I did. The problem was in the reception of Shalom by others. The reception of Shalom was very, very conservative. So what I have done, I was a stranger. And what I've done was a little bit bizarre.
I do not think that I could talk of the world as creation without a creator. The existence of God is something which cannot be shed without attacking Judaism in its heart.
I read a quote of yours which says, "I have always claimed that Judaism is not a theological religion." What do you mean by that?
First, my reading of the Bible, Hebrew Bible, and Talmudic literature is a literature which is not theological. Let me attempt to define theology. Normally, theology is considered to be a systematic description, meaning what is theology? Logos, we discuss the abstract part of it. That is systematic. That's coherent. In the Bible, it's not so coherent.
Scholarship wants to make things clear. Scholarship wants to give us an access. Scholarship wants to make everything systematic. What do you do if the phenomena that you're dealing with is not coherent, is not systematic, and it's not accessible to a simple understanding? So I think this is what Moshe Idel is trying to do, not to simplify, not to make it simplistic and flat.
Jewish philosophers or Kabbalists infused in the observance of the commandments a variety of meanings. For them, it was not robotical. It was to participate in the divine life, in the cosmic life, in the inner life, by the commandments. So that seems to me to be the emphasis found in Kabbalah, and not the theological. Theological exists in Kabbalah, but that is, how do you call it, subsidiary. It's not absent. I don't claim that's absent. The claim is subsidiary. Theology was not the dominant modus of thinking in the Bible and in the Rabbinic Judaism. What was more important is, what do you do?
When we're coming from the Western world to think about religion, we think about dogmas, we think about things to believe in. And you say, do you believe in this? Check, V-check, check. But this is not the way Idel wants us to think about Judaism. He wants us to think about Judaism as a form of life.
Since my emphasis is not so on the abstract part, the theological part, but much more on what those people did and how they lived, the rituals, the techniques, the experiences. That is to write not only about text, about the past. You're writing about personalities, living personalities, who had an impact on others. I spoke with the Kabbalists. Things which was a little bit forbidden. In scholarship, you don't enter in dialogue. I didn't care. I attempted to see how the text is performed. I can see that the topics I'm dealing with are living topics. I can see with my eyes.
As much as anything, Professor, it seems to me that you're really concerned about phenomenology.
That is true. I emphasize phenomenology because I believe that otherwise it's not only dry, it's not productive to write without it. For example, I don't believe there's one single good definition of ecstasy. Ecstatic experience are part of something bigger.
Looking at Judaism as an ecstatic religion, I think that's a very important element that he identified as a kind of constant element in our tradition that kind of appears in specific moments as a vital force that also has comes into some kind of tension with the more institutionalized kind of forms of religion. I think that Idel has transformed the way we look at our tradition in the university. So I mean, if you ask me how he impacted the way people look at Kabbalah and Judaism, there's a whole movement that I believe grew out of his study.
We were talking earlier today, and you said one of your aims is to free texts. Can you say more about that?
Look, I said it to free the text from theology. Like not to be very simplistic, assuming that two different people reading the same text will have the same reaction. Texts are very complex, and people are seeing different issues, not because they have an agenda, but because they are different from their character. I'm interested by saying free to allow the surfacing of the complexity. Texts speak about the author, they speak about the period, they speak about the field, they speak about the audience. From this complex melody, everyone is listening to something different. I believe it's important to see all those different aspects of complexity and not to ignore, to say what's important is what is the message. As if there is one message encoded there. The text is not a mailbox. It is much more complex. The language is changing. Even the person writing at the beginning of the book is changing in comparison to what happened at the end. It's life.